Bigfoot is often confused with Sasquatch. Yeti doesn't mind. Join us today on Speaking of Spirits as we talk about Bigfoot, Yeti, skunk ape, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call him. We're going to talk all about him on Speaking of Spirits today.
Hi, this is Colleen with Speaking of Spirits. I want to apologize up front for the audio quality in this podcast. We were not in our normal recording studio. Rest assured, in the very next podcast, we do return to the studio. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for joining us today on Speaking of Spirits. And as always, joining us today, I've got Colleen O'Hara, the leader of Pocatello Paranormal Research, which is powering a Speaking of Spirits podcast. Tim England is here with us today, too, and myself, Mark Scott, will be joining us today. So thanks for joining us. Today, we're going to be talking about the legendary Bigfoot. The tall, heavy, hairy, human-like, legendary creature.
That's what my wife says.
That's also how we refer to Tim, so we might have to redo it. So the Bigfoot legend, what do we know? Let's talk about him today.
So what I found interesting is that there are over 50 different types of Bigfoot around the world. And we've all heard of Sasquatch and Yeti and Tim, but most of us have heard of the skunk ape, right? Mm-hmm. But there are some other ones. There's the grass man in Ohio, the Mogollon monster in Arizona, Yurien in China, Yowie in Australia, and orange pendek in Sumatra, Indonesia, just to name a few. So in doing my research, I kind of thought it was interesting that some of this information came from the Washington State National Guard website, of all places. They said, according to their website, that Bigfoot is known by many titles with many different cultures around, although the name Bigfoot is generally attributed to the mountainous western region of North America. I still can't wrap my head around the fact that this is the National Guard website, but it is, okay? It's the Washington State National Guard website. The common name for Sasquatch comes from the Salish Sasquatch, while the Algonquin of the north central region of the continent refer to it as Wetigo, or the Wendigo. I don't know how you pronounce that. Other nations tell of a large creature much like a man, but imbued with special powers and characteristics. There's the Ojibwe of the Northern Plains, I guess that's a tribe, believe that the Rougarou appeared in times of danger, and other nations agreed that the hairy apparition was a messenger of a warning, telling man to change his ways. So Native Americans believe that they're a warning creature when seen. So
that's interesting.
One of my biggest stories of Bigfoot is I'm a pit boss by trade, so I make lots of barbecue. And I went to, it was a big event at the Mech in Pocatello. The Mech is kind of the big gym
Mhm.
and the outside there's a whole bunch of vendors there. And I was trying to time my ribs so they were perfect. It's an art.
It is an
Mhm.
art.
And I was trying to get back, and there is an Indian fella, and he said he was an artist, and he would not let me go. I tried my best to get away from the guy, and I think it was about 15 minutes into me trying to leave.
Mhm.
And finally, he made me buy one of his pictures, and the picture was of Bigfoot. And the
Mhm.
Bigfoot had a trident and stabbed the fish. And I gave him $20 for that picture.
You still have
Cool.
it?
So the fun story about that story is I got it framed and then I gave it to my parents for an anniversary present.
Nice.
So as I had that experience, I thought, I wonder how much money people are making off of this Bigfoot character.
Oh, yeah.
Dun dun dun.
Yeah, I bet a lot.
And then it ruined my whole perception.
Well, speaking of money, I don't know, but we do have a local professor here who does make a lot of money off of Bigfoot.
Jeffrey Milton.
Yes, he doesn't like every couple of years he'll do Bigfoot symposium. You have to pay quite a lot of money to go to it. He's on a lot of different documentaries and different TV shows, in which I'm sure
Okay.
he's making a lot of money.
He also claims to have Bigfoot poop.
Yeah, the thing so you know, I don't know why it's easier for me. I know why it's easier for me to believe in alien life form rather than Bigfoot. And the reason why is because if it is a mammal, we would find evidence of it. Scat, poop, bones, skulls, something, right?
Mhm.
And of all of the things that people have collected and they have taken it to a lab, it turns out to be bear hair or raccoon poop or bear poop or lion poop or some kind of, it's never an unknown species poop or hair.
I've got some questions about some of those, though.
About,
Some of the samples that have been sent to the lab.
yeah,
I think the lab will come up with an answer.
not necessarily. No, I deal with enough labs day to day that they would come back as an unknown sample. It would come back as an unknown. So they'll have, I mean, labs specialize in hair or in, because I've had to sample cattle hair for different constituents that, you know, contaminants and stuff like that when we find them dead. And they'll come back and they will tell you like an unknown constituent or something, if that's the case, because they have a library that they're testing against. And raccoon hair is going to be, it's already been tested. So if it's a raccoon, it's going to ping it. It's going to say, yeah, this is a raccoon. So I would assume we don't have a sample of Bigfoot hair, or else the lab would say it's Bigfoot, or it would say unknown.
See, I don't know. I think a lab will come up with an answer. Instead of saying unknown, a lot of labs will come up with this is the closest, or this is what we think it is.
Well, it's the way that they analyze this stuff.
Mhm.
It's not. It would not do that. I mean, I'm familiar enough to know that it would not do that, because everything's got a different. When they use like a mass spectrometer, everything's got a different signature. Everything has a different signature. The signature for a raccoon is always going to overlap with a raccoon.
Mhm.
The signature for a bear is going to overlap with a bear. So if you get an unknown signature in there, it's not, there's nothing to overlap it with. There's not a known quantity of a Bigfoot to say, okay, this is a Bigfoot. It would just say this is an unknown. The peak is going to be different than any other peak that they've ever seen.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so they would just come back and say it's unknown. They're not going to come back and say it's a raccoon when the peak is not a raccoon. So that's the thing. The labs aren't, I mean, they're going to lose their certification if they do stuff like that. And they have to go through a pretty stringent certification process anyway to be certified labs. And so they risk a lot if they do something like that. So that's my bone to pick with The fact that our professor says he's got all of these known samples, and it's like, well, known with what? Because I've never seen anything come back and say that this is. I mean, why haven't we found? We have hunters that literally walk every square inch of like Idaho, Washington, Northern California.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? Out for the elusive rack on that deer or that elk, or looking. There's people out there all the time. Why haven't they found a dead Bigfoot? Now, a friend of mine says it's because they're having Viking burial ceremonies. And so she also smokes a lot of pot. Just saying. So when there's weed involved, you can pretty much come up with anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, I have not seen a whole bunch of Bigfoot around a lake shoving some burning body out there in the middle of the water. I don't know. Maybe I just haven't been in the right place.
A Viking ceremony would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, I know, right? They got their little Viking hats on,
Yeah.
or their really big Viking hats on, as the case may be.
Yeah.
So I got in a big argument's not the right word, discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
With my friend.
Yeah.
And we were talking about first generations. So however you want to line that up.
Mhm.
If you're religious, Adam.
Mhm.
If you're not religious,
Right.
something else, Steve. I don't know, something else. Anyway, there's a first of something.
Right.
Mhm.
And again, if you're on the religious spectrum of things, those men lived for a really long time, they say. And so we were talking about things. And what if the aspects were like a first generation human?
The who?
A first generation human.
Okay.
And that human is whatever, thousands of years old,
Okay.
has nice long hair,
Mhm.
but poops the same as you and I.
Mhm.
Okay. So, apart from being an ape or a big, hairy thing, everything genetically would come back as a human.
Yep.
Well, that's an
Now
interesting concept.
That actually makes sense because in the Bigfoot community, there
You have
is
meetings
a
at
thing-
night on
We
Mondays?
do, yes, we have our
It's
meetings.
exciting.
I'm actually wearing a Bigfoot
Yes,
T-shirt that says "I
yes.
believe." So. Yes, in our weekly meetings, we.
That's where we buy the pictures.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God! There's a reason they left me out of these meetings. Okay. All right.
But in the Bigfoot community, there is a saying then that the first person who can actually produce a Bigfoot body will probably become a millionaire, and the second person who will do that will be charged with murder
Yeah. Yeah.
because they are so close to the humans.
Well, yeah, and so are chimpanzees, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing is that they're, and if you really, from a lot of research and stuff that I've done, books I've read and stuff on the Bigfoot, basically we've got a creature that is probably, well, they are very, very similar to humans.
Right.
And I would say their intelligence is almost equal to,
Probably a lot higher.
if not a lot higher, yeah, considering humanoids are de-evolving. That's another story.
We also talked about that DNA. It was a great conversation.
Yes, I bet.
Did it require
but if you,
whiskey?
Okay.
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 There we go.
But the Bigfoot is of equal intelligence to humans, but they put a conscious, intentional effort into not being discovered or ran across by humans. Now, the why they don't really want to interact with the human race, I have not come up with a solid answer or theory for that. But they
Probably
are.
because most of the humans they see are armed.
That very well could be.
I mean,
Very well.
I believe me, I'm a second right amendment chick and I am armed. But,
I totally
you know,
believe that
if
too.
they're out in the woods, most people are armed,
Mhm.
you know?
And so they could have, but for whatever reason, they put a conscious intention, including how they live
Yeah.
and including their burial ceremonies.
No, maybe. See, Viking ceremonies.
Yeah, they're not Viking though, but they're.
Well, I know.
Yeah, but
just saying.
with everything with
Right.
an idea to
Right.
make themselves not found.
So North American settlers started reporting sightings during the late 1800s into the 1900s, with the occasional finding of footprints, sporadic encounters, and even a few grainy photos and videos adding to the mystery. Those who claim to have seen Bigfoot have described everything from a large upright ape to an actual hairy human, sometimes standing over 8 feet tall and described as powerfully built. The debate and research continue. Entire organizations exist to study and document Bigfoot and prove its existence, and groups regularly search the Northwest woods looking for ultimate proof. So I would tend to believe, just my thought, just from scientifically, that if there's something out there, it would be more related to an ape. But just from
that's
the
conventional wisdom. Yes.
well, the strength that these things are supposed to have. Chimpanzees' strengths are bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Like they can rip a human in half.
Yeah.
Okay, and these Bigfoot, allegedly, if they are out there, they are allegedly that strong. Like they could rip trees up and do things like that. So that lends me to believe it's more ape-like than human-like. But again, we have never seen. We've always had like the grainy photo of something out there that's probably a bear in the through the trees. Or there's one video that I looked at for this episode that, if anything, makes me believe that this one was credible. And it was the one that some hikers, and I think they were in the Andes, and it was in the snow, and they just happened to have they were videotaping some of their hike, and they were looking across a valley at a dark human shaped figure just booking it up this, like straight up this mountain. And it didn't, I mean, obviously didn't have any clothing on. It didn't have poles, like trekking poles to help him. It was snowy. That one, if anything, looked to me like that could be human looking. It was dark, it was huge, and it was just booking up the snow up a slope.
Going up a mountain, very steep incline.
Very steep incline, and just no problem at all.
And just motoring up there like
yes.
it was. Yeah.
And even then they said it, for us just to travel the distance it did in the just short time that we videotaped it would take us several minutes to try to get up there because of the deep snow and the slope, and they just didn't have any poles or anything. It was just hoofing it.
Yeah.
But again, it was far enough away. It kind of looked humanish, but you couldn't really tell. I don't know. It's like everything is always grainy, and yeah, I guess if you ran into something like there, you'd be not so steady, you know. But gosh, I don't know.
Well, another thing is that a lot of and Dr. Melvin has he has casts of footprints.
Right.
And in these casts, if you look at your palms, you've got lines, your palm lines.
Right.
You can actually see these lines in the cast.
Right.
And they are different from one to another.
Yeah.
That's a lot of real deep detail,
but
and access to go into. Yeah.
Could somebody fake those? I mean, could they make something to make an imprint that shows lines and grooves and?
They could, but to make so many of them and to make them so different.
Yeah.
And yeah, sure, in theory you could.
Yeah,
But that would be a lot of energy and effort just for,
Yeah.
trying to create a hoax or something.
You can tell that I'm totally not a believer here. I'm the skeptic in the group, but I want it to be true. I really do, because it would be fascinating. But gosh, all of the backpacking that I've done growing up, like alone for weeks in the Sierra Nevadas, all of the hiking and backpacking and all the trips that I've taken up there, and either been in a small group, 2 or 3 people, or alone for weeks at a time, I've never seen anything. Never seen anything that I knew what it was. I'm like, okay, there's a bear, been chased by a bear. I up close and personal with a very pissed off mama black bear, but I've never, I've never seen it. But that doesn't mean it's not there. I'm just saying I'm the skeptic. So according to storymaps.org, arcgis.com, which is a pretty interesting site. As of 2020, over 3,500 of these experiences, so sightings, have been reported within the contiguous United States alone. One of the earliest Bigfoot sightings occurred in October of 1870, now this is fascinating to me, east of San Jose, California, in the middle of the Diablo mountain range of Stanislaus County, California. So this was documented in the Titusville Morning Herald, and the paper refers to the wild men of California who roamed the local mountain ranges and looked like gorillas. And a letter submitted to the Mining Journal and tells the story of two women on a drive home after visiting a friend in September 1970 on US Highway 41. And somehow I got this all messed up. This is a different story. Anyway, this story in Michigan said they saw a huge white furry creature looking down towards us. So anybody who knows the Diablo Mountain Range of Stanislaus County, California, now it's very populated. There is a little swath that is not. There's a park there, but the Diablo Mountain Range, all around that now is pretty populated. You do have like a delta channel that goes through there, but there's not a lot of cover. There's not a lot of forest. So 1870s, maybe there was cover. There would have been more oak trees than conifers in that area. But I wouldn't imagine that there's that much cover out there for something that large. But again, so, you've got these early accounts. Sightings continue all across North America. You've got Chicken, Arkansas, Bath, New York, the famous one, Provo, Utah, Ashland, Oregon, all report sightings. The Provo, Utah one was kind of interesting because that one was taken over a rooftop on a slope that was very, very steep. And it was large, and standing there, it looked like a Bigfoot would look. But when someone was close enough to look behind through the leaves, it looked like a black bear to me. But certainly standing there, it didn't have the shape of a bear. It had the shape of a human. And then they tried to go up the slope. The people who were videotaping it tried to get up that slope, and they said it was really, really steep, and it was not easy to get up.
I think that's most of those sightings have that in common, a real steep hill to where you can go up. And that's my Bigfoot story is very, very similar to that, where I've told it several times on the podcast. If you want to know it, go back and listen to it. But I was in the valley, and where the quietness was a really steep shale mountain. And there was no hope of me going up. And the follow-up to that story is I was clearing out some trees this last summer, a couple months ago. And I went into a heavily wooded area, and I looked up, and there were 2 aspens and 2 pines, and the very top of the tree was broken right in half. And I have zero explanation for that. Zero. Other than that's where I was standing when the story happened, and it was weird, so therefore it was Bigfoot.
Okay.
Makes sense to me.
So according to satelliteinternet.com, Washington State has the largest amount of sightings with 676 reported.
That makes sense.
Interestingly, Texas has 246.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking East Texas, obviously, not West Texas.
Yeah, because there's also a lot of sightings in Oklahoma.
Yes. One has to imagine that those East Texas. The East Texas can get pretty thick in those woods. Mm-hmm. So there would be a lot of cover. California has 450 sightings from Mount Diablo, although most of them are north, in the northern part of California and the mountainous Sierras. Yeah. And then I spent a lot of time in the Trinity Alps of Northern California, which is a beautiful place, and they have a lot of Bigfoot. There's Bigfoot restaurants and all kinds of stuff up there. Bigfoot's a big thing to the economy. So, according to Live Science, when a definite conclusion has been reached through scientific analysis, the samples have typically turned out to be ordinary sources, and we talked about this. So, for example, in 2014, a team of researchers led by geneticist Brian Sykes from the University of Oxford in England conducted a genetic analysis on 36 hair samples claiming to be the Bigfoot or the Yeti, a similar ape-like creature said to exist in Himalayas, which is the Yeti. Almost all of the hair turned out to be from known sources such as cows, raccoons, deer, and humans. However, two of the samples closely matched an extinct Paleolithic polar bear, which that's interesting. So was it like in the ice and then it thawed and then they found hair, which could be,
Well, this kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. They can't identify it, so they're going to reach for whatever their closest answer is.
Well, yeah, it says closely matched, so it didn't say exactly, but it didn't say conclusively, right? So these samples may have come from unknown bear species or a hybrid of modern bears, but they were from a bear, not a primate. So, for example, there are polar bears and grizzly bears now mating, which may lead to, so that's a whole new species of bear, which is not, this is not a typical thing. You know what I'm saying? So I'm just talking about hair in general, right? So now you have like you're talking about the first generation, right? You have these polar bears and grizzlies that are mating now that I've read about. That's going to be a whole unknown or brand new category of critter. And I forget the term for those bears, but so it may lead to how people are saying, oh, the polar bears are going to go extinct. Well, maybe this is nature's way of saying we're not going to go extinct. We're going to find a way to adapt. So they mate with a species who has adapted to not living on ice. So genetics can provide another reason to doubt the existence of Bigfoot. So here you go. The science suggests that there can't be I'm trying to read this. The science suggests that there can't just be one elusive, unique creature. Many individuals would have to exist in order to provide enough genetic diversity to maintain a population. This increases the chances that one would be killed by a hunter or a motorist or something like that, because you'd have a viable genetic population going on, right? Or even found dead by accident, disease, old age, by a hiker or farmer at some point, yet no bodies have ever been found. People do occasionally claim to find bones or other large body parts. For example, a man in Utah discovered what he thought was a fossilized Bigfoot skull in 2013. A paleontologist confirmed that the skull was simply an oddly weathered rock. So, yeah, that sucked for him. He was hoping to be a millionaire. In North Carolina, there are sightings of Nobby, and which is very much like a Sasquatch. People have recorded screams and howls and the tree knocking, right, which is common. Several townspeople have seen this creature and heard this creature, and some have run-ins with this creature, and they've been so concerned by its presence they don't venture out at night, and nor would they allow their faces I find this kind of interesting. They wouldn't allow their faces to be shown on camera, not for fear of ridicule by people who've seen them on camera, but because the Sasquatch or Nobby would know and would be vengeful. So I guess Nobbies have TVs. Just saying.
They could.
They could.
I would.
Yeah. According to the website, aka the Bigfoot World Map, there is, yeah, I know, you would love it. You would love it. I'll have to find you a shirt, Mark. The Chinese Yeti first burst upon an unsuspecting Western world in the Sunday Telegraph on 22nd April 1979. under the dramatic headline, "Soldiers Ate a Yeti." Okay. The article was based on one Chinese journal. I don't even know what to say, saying some kind of fossil, or that's his name, I don't know, which reported that as long ago as in 1962, soldiers of the Chinese army operating in the area described in the foothills of the Himalayas had killed and eaten a Yeti-like creature. Probably tastes like chicken.
Probably does.
Probably the same.
Probably pork.
The article spoke of
Himalayan chicken.
Himalayan chicken. There you go. It's a new dish. The article spoke of the meat from a snowman, which the soldiers had killed in a remote part of the Yunnan province. At least 10 other Yeti sightings have been made since then in and around Tibet, when including one as recently as 1976. So
we all laugh at that. Recently, there was a former restaurant owner who got in lots of trouble in Pocatello.
yes, I remember
because he was getting various dead animals in the region and preparing those animals for Chinese folks who were coming over. And that rang some bells in my head, so I did a little bit of research. And apparently in the Asian culture, and someone listening is going to say, "Hey, Tim, you're butchering this," and I apologize right now. But they view the animals of the region to be experts of the region, and if you partake of the animals, then you're able to take the full experience in. From what I gathered, again, Google was my teacher.
Oh boy.
And
Oh yeah, so you're consuming the animal's knowledge and memories, and
Yeah. So
Yes.
you're
So the
getting
spirit.
local knowledge.
you're getting the spirit of the animal, right? Okay.
so as we may poo-poo that little tidbit, that would make perfect sense for their culture, because they wanted to know the thing.
Well, the Chinese army historically, though, has never been known for their wonderful feasts.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they get incredibly hungry
Mhm.
Yeah.
at times. And,
Well, yeah, you're going to shoot kill anything.
Yeah, when you're out in the field for a couple of months and you haven't had a decent meal in a couple of weeks, and yeah, you'll be taking down anything you can that can be.
Yeah, Bigfoot would feed a lot of people. So I'm assuming that there's a lot of people out there that believe in this, and I'm going to be one of those. Even though I do paranormal investigations and I do believe in a lot of phenomenon that happens, you're going to have to show me the body. I'm going to have to be one of those that says, "Show me the proof." Are there things out there? Sure. I mean, we find stuff all the time that science says has gone extinct, and then 40 years later they go, "Oh my God, there it is. It's not extinct after all. It learned how to adapt and is completely in a different life." Just to me, an 8-foot tall human-like thing, like the article suggests, you have to have a population in order to not inbreed to the point where you end up with something really, really odd, or that doesn't live. Inbreeding, I mean, the babies, after so many times, the animals, people do, they inbreed dogs and cats, whatever, these breeders that are not ethical. And then pretty soon the puppies or whatever, they don't live. So you have to have a big enough population to have genetic diversity to keep the animals going. So where are they living? How come we have never seen, what kills me, the Bigfoot Hunter show, right? All wound up. Like, I saw this one episode where he's all wound up and he goes, "Look, there's a Bigfoot hut." And it's like a mound. It's obviously a place that probably bears have hibernated, And I'm thinking he can barely get in through the opening. And this guy's not real big. I'm like, he's 5'7". He can barely squeeze through the opening, and then he gets in there and he's got his camera in there and he's all tucked into a ball. He can barely move. It's so small. And it's supposed to be for a Bigfoot, which is like 8 feet tall. It's just enormous thing. I'm like, oh, come on now. There's a cult following for some of these shows. Okay, Monster Men, and that's another one. Okay, that's a whole other episode. I'm just saying, show me the proof. Because in order for a Bigfoot to survive, some of the winters in the places that they live, they've got to have somewhere that they can get in from the shelter, and it's going to have to be a substantial size.
Mm-hmm.
So not so small that a guy who's 5'7" can barely squeeze through the opening, because these Bigfoots are big.
True.
Yeah. So I'm going to be the naysayer in the group. Show me the proof. I believe more in werewolves. Just saying. Okay. Because I've seen people change at the moon and they get creepy. So, but
So you don't
what?
of Bigfoots?
Immortality?
Yeah. Well, immortality. That's probably the wrong word. But he's been around a long time. They don't have to populate because it's a guy or guys.
You mean like the first guy? Is that what
Yeah.
you were talking
Mhm.
about? But he
Just
lives
hanging around.
forever?
Well, why not?
Just
Okay.
hangs out, just does his thing. Again, there's they do have a population, and they are smart enough to. They tend to be very nomadic, so they don't stay in the same place.
Hmm.
So they move. They live very much like the Native Americans. They are in groups, and when they do marry, they marry from other groups.
Okay, you're not seeing my eyes roll. Because this is a podcast. He's like seriously saying this shit right now. Just saying.
I'm just saying, for people, things
It's
I've
like,
read,
if
things I've
anybody out
studied.
there has performed one of these marriage rites, please call. Just saying. No, I get it. I get it. I guess there's been enough sightings that there has to be something out there. But also, have living in the South as long as I did, I know that copious amounts of moonshine is consumed, and I don't know how much of that was involved with some of these sightings. However,
Definitely at the wedding.
along with the shotgun, but yeah.
Well, again, a lot of the sightings, Bigfoot sightings, a lot of those come from people that have more to lose by telling their story.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, that is true. I think.
I mean, you get into the
Yeah.
point of military personnel,
Yeah,
law enforcement officers,
right.
and all over the country.
That's true. I mean, that's true, and I discounted that. That for definitely. I mean, people's reputation are on the line, and they're not going to come up with something bogus. So
I mean, a lot of these people are actually putting their career on the line by telling the story.
yeah.
So, I mean, there's got to be something if they're willing to come out to that point.
Yeah.
And it's also, as a paranormal investigator, one of the things you look for, or one of the things I look for anyway, is if somebody is telling me their story, how are they telling it?
Mm-hmm.
And you've got people that are recounting stories that happened years ago, and they are still very emotional about the event.
Yeah, that's true.
Something happened, they saw something, they encountered something, and even years later, just thinking about it makes them very agitated, very
Yeah.
emotional. So something was there. There's some, if for nothing else, they believe this encounter happened at this level.
Yep, that's
Because
true.
you can't bring back that kind of emotion years later. If you're that good of an actor, then, well, you could be making a lot more money doing something else. But, I mean, so there's some, the people who tell these stories, some
Yeah,
of them,
that's
not
true.
all of them,
Right. No,
again,
you're right.
like reports with the UFOs. When I was young, the only people that you ever heard a UFO report from was, probably somebody who didn't have a high education, only had a couple of teeth, had a really strong accent.
Right.
And for a while, those were all the reports you heard of the Bigfoot Sasquatch type creature too.
Right.
But then with both the UFOs and the Bigfoot, we started having law enforcement personnel. With UFOs, we started having military personnel. We started having commercial airline pilots
Right.
come out and start telling their stories. And we've got the same thing with, this Bigfoot, Sasquatch, skunk ape, depending on what part of the
Right.
country, world you're in, that these stories are coming out by people that have more to lose
Yeah.
by telling their story.
But we know from criminalistic research that humans are vastly unreliable at what they see, at recounting what they see. Do they see something? Yes. But an eyewitness account of something does not make it proof, because
True.
we all see things a little differently, and our mind tends to make familiar shapes out of stuff. We see this with the paranormal. So our mind,
we can apply that theory to everything in the paranormal.
right, and that does happen. So our mind tends to want to make, like, look at the dog in the clouds. We try to make familiar shapes. So human shape is the most familiar shape to us. So our mind goes there. It could be a black bear standing up behind a tree or next to a tree, because they do stand on their feet, or a grizzly or any bear. And so we immediately, that looks like a Bigfoot. I'm just saying that humans are unbelievably unreliable as eyewitnesses.
True.
Now, that doesn't make that their stories are any less true to them.
Well, that's very true. But again, we can apply that to everything in the paranormal.
I agree. I agree. I'm just saying that, take it. These reports, yes, people they have a lot to lose. A lot of the professionals have a lot to lose when they come out and they give us their accounting of whatever has happened to them. I love the shirt, Mark, but I'm still, even though it says I believe, I'm still going to remain a skeptic on this one until somebody other than our local professor shows us some proof that the whole scientific community can get behind and say, yes, this unknown hair sample matches this body, and this body is not a human and it's not an ape. It's somewhere there in the middle, it's an unknown humanoid. So when that happens, then absolutely I'm jumping on the train. But until that, I just can't wrap my head around
So
it.
you ready for this one?
Uh-oh.
So in conclusion,
Yes.
my friend and I were talking about lots of things. And at the end, we summed it up with, what about everything else we talk about? So UFOs, ghosts,
Sure.
dimensions, dimensional beings.
That I could wrap my head around a lot easier.
And so the dimensional beings that we were talking about is, do you remember the butterfly effect?
Yes.
So there's no poop, there's no hair, maybe a footprint. I don't know. Maybe they went off the path. But if they were a high intelligence dimensional being and they didn't want to mess with our culture, would we be able to find anything?
Yeah, I can wrap my head around that a whole lot easier, that they're popping in and out of dimensions. Honestly, I can. I don't know why it's easier for me to go there, but it is.
That is one of the theories with the Bigfoot Sasquatch entities, that they've got some type of, also like, they can control some type of like mind control. Because there's been incidents of people that have like been there, and in one encounter that I remember hearing, a guy was out fishing and he was sitting on one side of the river, and he saw the Bigfoot creature on the other side of the river, and he had his rifle right next to him, and he kept thinking, man, I need to grab my rifle, but he couldn't move.
I think I do remember reading that.
And then, the creature was gone, and all of a sudden everything was fine with him again.
Yeah, I do.
And so
yeah.
one of the theories, ideas, is that they do have a little bit of, or maybe possibly have some type of mind control. Now, you can go down, that rabbit hole too. Was this mind controlled by the creature, or did you just experience something that challenged your beliefs so hard that you just momentarily overloaded your system?
Shocks.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us today on Speaking of Spirits as we discuss the Bigfoot, Yeti, Sasquatch creature. We're so glad you could join us today. We had a great time doing this. We hope you enjoyed listening to it. If you are enjoying the podcast, go to wherever you get your podcast, give us a 5-star review. That helps others find this podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Bye-bye.
Ha 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 ha!